This is Medical Device Legal News. Today is August 8th, 2023. I'm Sam Bernstein. On July 31st, Kendrick Joaquin Griffin, the co-owner of New Horizons Durable Medical Equipment, was sentenced to 49 months of prison in order to pay over $5 million restitution related to an orthopedic supplies fraud case. Griffin allegedly paid kickbacks to marketers to obtain patient information and then submitted false claims to Medicare and Medicaid for orthopedic equipment that was never provided, not medically necessary, and not authorized by a physician. The investigation was conducted by the Texas Medicaid Fraud Control Unit in partnership with the FBI and the HHS OIG. On July 28th, the FDA issued draft guidance addressing clinical considerations for clinical studies of devices intended to treat opioid use disorder that are used to support marketing submissions. Clinical trials addressing opioid use disorder are particularly challenging in light of the fact that the population of participants tend to drop out of studies, tend to relapse, or may take other medications. Accordingly, generating usable and reliable study data can be often challenging. Accordingly, the FDA issued this guidance to address design recommendations for such studies to aid the FDA in determining whether a particular device intended to treat opioid use disorder is safe and effective. The guidance recommends that these studies have well-defined study populations that include the diversity of participants prevalent among individuals with opioid use disorder. The guidance also recommends that the studies include appropriately designed controls to monitor drug use, control for bias. They also include appropriate follow-up period, as well as study participant retention plans and a data analysis plan. As you're aware, the FDA's guidance documents do not establish legally enforceable responsibilities unless specific regulatory or statutory requirements are cited, and if and when finalized, instead describe what the agency's current thinking is on a topic and should only be reviewed as recommendations. On July 27th, the FDA issued guidance addressing consumer labeling recommendations for hydrogen peroxide-based contact lens care products for inclusion in 510(k) submissions. Earlier on July 26th, the FDA sent a draft proposed rule to the White House Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs for review, and that proposed rule would explicitly subject laboratory developed tests, or LDTs, to the FDA's jurisdiction. There's been significant political debate regarding whether LDTs should be subject to the FDA's jurisdiction or CMS's jurisdiction under the Clinical Laboratory Improvement Amendments, or CLIA, and this proposed rule reflects an attempt to address regulatory oversight by FDA of LDTs. This is the final step before the FDA can publish the proposed rule in the Federal Register and initiate the notice and comment rulemaking period. Accordingly, we expect the proposed rule to be published imminently. On July 24th, David Santana, the owner of Conclave Media and Nationwide Health Advocates, was charged and agreed to plead guilty in connection with a $44 million telemedicine and healthcare fraud scheme involving medically unnecessary durable medical equipment, including orthotics such as back braces and knee braces, as well as genetic tests. Nationwide and Conclave allegedly were paid on a per-order basis by fraudulent telemarketing companies to generate fraudulent orders for durable medical equipment and genetic testing. Santana allegedly worked with medical staffing companies to identify doctors and nurses who were willing to review and sign pre-populated orders for these products, typically without seeing the patient and often without reviewing the medical record of the beneficiary. Santana faces up to 10 years in prison and a fine of up to $250,000 or twice the gross pecuniary gain or loss. On July 20th, Peter Stoll III pled guilty to a felony count of violating the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act by causing the introduction of misbranded and adulterated medical devices into interstate commerce. In 2017, Stoll forged false letters from the FDA purporting to show that the FDA had granted pre-market clearance to sell two different medical devices, one a surgical drill used for bone cutting, sawing, and drilling, and a second device which was a reusable sterilization container for medical instruments. While Stoll was responsible for submitting 510(k) pre-market notifications for these products in his role with regulatory team for this company, Stoll admitted that he never submitted any 510(k) documents to FDA regarding either device and instead forged documents from the FDA showing that the products have been cleared by the FDA. As a result, the manufacturer sold tens of thousands of dollars worth of adulterated and misbranded medical devices throughout the United States. The products have since been recalled, and Stoll faces up to 3 years in prison, 1 year of supervised release, and up to a $250,000 fine. On July 18th, the FDA published a warning letter issued to Outset Medical on July 5th. Outset Medical, as you may know, is a manufacturer of hemodialysis systems. These are systems used to perform dialysis on patients to effectively clean the blood of patients for patients with end-stage renal disease or potentially an acute kidney injury. The letter alleges that the tablet cart with prefiltration is adulterated and misbranded because Outset did not obtain pre-market clearance or approval for the product, and the FDA believes that the device is a Class II medical device, water purification system for hemodialysis. This was an updated version of the product that includes certain filters and other water filtration components. The letter also alleges that Outset's main product, the tablet hemodialysis system, is adulterated and misbranded because Outset was allegedly promoting it as providing continuous renal replacement therapy, but that the product was not actually cleared or approved for that use. As has been the case for a number of warning letters we've covered in the past, this warning letter illustrates the need for medical device manufacturers to carefully evaluate whether changes to the products necessitate the submission of a 510K or a PMA in accordance with FDA guidance. Even if a manufacturer ultimately determines that it is not required to submit a 510K for a device change, the manufacturer must ensure that it maintains a complete file explaining its analysis and conclusion. This documentation and the accuracy of the analysis is even more important for life-sustaining products such as hemodialysis systems or other medical devices without which patients may die. It is also exceedingly important to ensure that appropriate documentation is maintained, as a failure to submit 510K or a PMA can result in significant liability issues in the event of a product liability case where having had a 510K or a PMA may have afforded certain protections to the manufacturer. On July 18th, the FDA published a warning letter issued to Edge Biologicals on June 27th regarding their manufacture of certain Class 1 and Class 2 in vitro diagnostics for medical applications. The warning letter alleges a number of quality system regulation failures, including repeated failures to validate sterilization, failure to adequately establish procedures for corrective and preventive actions, failing to establish procedures and establish requirements that must be met by suppliers, contractors, and consultants, failing to maintain a device master record, failure to establish procedures for product acceptance activities, and failure to conduct quality audits. Medical device manufacturers, including manufacturers of in vitro diagnostic tests, must ensure that they engage experienced regulatory personnel and adopt policies and procedures and practices to address the myriad of requirements of the FDA quality system regulation requirements. On July 17th, the FDA released updated guidance on a voluntary program for the qualification of medical device development tools, or MDDTs. The guidance describes a framework for the voluntary proposal and qualification of MDDTs by CDRH, including the criteria for evaluating an MDDT for a specific context of use, considerations for qualification, and the contents of a qualification package. An MDDT is a scientifically substantiated method, material, or measurement used to assess the safety, effectiveness, and performance of a medical device to support regulatory decision-making. The FDA reviews MDDTs to reach a qualification decision regarding whether the MDDT can be relied upon to facilitate regulatory decision-making when used in accordance with its context of use. The guidance describes three different categories of MDDTs based on how the tool measures relevant parameters. Those categories are: 1, non-clinical assessment models that measure or predict parameters regarding device safety, effectiveness, or performance, including animal or human-based models that replace clinical testing. 2, biomarker tests, including pre- and post-treatment tests for which their precision and accuracy has been demonstrated. And the third category are clinical outcome assessments that describe how a person feels, functions, or survives, including measures, methods, and instructions for administering the tool. On July 17th, the DOJ announced guilty pleas from Daniel M. Carver and Louis Gino Carver in connection with a $67 million Medicare fraud scheme involving genetic testing and durable medical equipment. The Carvers owned and operated call centers that targeted Medicare beneficiaries with deceptive telemarketing campaigns to solicit them for unnecessary genetic testing and DME. The Carvers paid kickbacks and bribes to telemedicine companies for completed doctors' orders, sold those orders to labs and DME companies in exchange for kickbacks, forged doctors' and patient signatures, and tricked medical providers into ordering medically unnecessary genetic testing. Daniel Carver pled guilty to conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy to defraud the U.S., and conspiracy to pay and receive kickbacks, and faces up to 25 years in prison. Louis Carver pled guilty to conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud and faces a maximum penalty of 10 years in prison. This case is yet another example of the DOJ aggressively prosecuting healthcare fraud in the durable medical equipment and laboratory space. In related news, on July 20th, the OIG issued a special fraud alert cautioning practitioners not to enter into arrangements with fraudulent telemedicine companies. The fraud alert identifies suspect characteristics of practitioner arrangements with telemedicine companies that providers should avoid. As we have indicated in prior broadcasts, manufacturers should conduct appropriate diligence of marketing companies, distributors, and sales representatives to ensure that they're not engaging in illegal activities such as purchasing fraudulent orders or using telemarketing companies to generate fraudulent business. It's also important to carefully review with clients the financial arrangements that you enter into with marketing companies, as certain per-click or per-referral arrangements may raise significant concerns under the federal anti-kickback statute and other fraud and abuse laws. Thank you for joining me this week for Medical Device Legal News. I'm Sam Bernstein, a partner of McGuire Healthcare Group. I'd also like to thank my colleague Sophie Moros for helping to make today's program possible. I look forward to seeing you next time.